Just because something is entertaining, just because something even is educational, doesn't necessarily mean that it's marketing. PSA, you should not be expecting consistent sales if you are not consistently marketing your business. Point blank, period, end of conversation. The main thing that I'm seeing is that you are actually solving for the symptom, not the source. What is one thing right now in your business that you are doing that has not moved the needle in any capacity? There's no evidence to say it's creating momentum. There's no results to show for it. Why would we keep paying a gardener who's killing the flowers? You are going to actually need to do less in order for you to make more. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. Today we are diving in on what I actually would kind of at this point consider a segment, which is actually called an unfiltered episode. And that is because today this is not a scripted episode. This is not something that I have spent copious amounts of hours outlining and structuring and all of these pieces. And that is because these are actually your questions. The questions that you've submitted to me via socials. And if you, by the way, have never done that before, there's a couple different ways to do this. There is actually a form that lives on my website that if you do want to submit a question to Ambitious, you can submit there at any moment. So if right now you're like, there's a question I would love to ask you, I really want to make sure that I submit this because it's what's happening in my business right now. Make sure to submit that via the form that's on our website. Now, with that though, the submissions that we have today and the questions going to be answering are all going to be business Q&A questions, the top questions that you're struggling with in your business. These were submitted for today's episode via social, and I want to be really just honest about how I'm approaching these. These questions that I'm reviewing are not questions that I have dove into. They're not questions that I actually truthfully have seen before today. I am going to be giving you my, as per the episode title, my unfiltered opinion as to what it is that I recommend for you and for your business, given the question that you provided. So with all that being said, let's dive into the episode. Question number one. My content, I find, does get engagement, but it's not translating into sales. What do you think that I'm missing? So there's a lot that I could say about this, but I'm going to give you my instant thought that came to my brain. If you are finding that your social media is getting a lot of engagement, you're getting people who are saying, I love your stuff. This so resonates with me. This is so valuable. Love following you. They're kind of cheerleading for you. You might even find that your audience is a little bit less quiet, but all of your data is telling you that your content is being consumed and people are engaging with it. The thing that you want to remember is that just because something is entertaining, just because something even is educational, doesn't necessarily mean that it's marketing. And this is where I think a lot of people miss the mark. They try to post social content, but they don't necessarily think about the underbelly of what is the marketing intention? What's the gap that we're creating? What symptoms are we speaking to in this piece of content? What kind of buyer type is this intended for? What stage of the buying cycle should someone be at when they consume this piece of content? What is the associated action that we want somebody to take? The person who consumes this, are we assuming that this person is warm and that they are maybe, someone who's just been actively consuming our content? Is this intended as a piece of content for some of the hottest leads in your audience? Those are questions that you should be able to answer when you're looking to put out a post. And so when we go to put out posts, in content on social media, in anything, when it comes to content in general, it doesn't matter what platform, if it's Instagram, if it's TikTok, if it's YouTube, the social media content doing well can mean that it was very engaging, that it was maybe even entertaining or super educational. But if it doesn't technically activate something that your consumer has as a pain point that they're navigating, a desire that they have, or truthfully, if this does not create a gap, meaning that they come in with a certain state and by the end of this piece of content or marketing that they realize and they've identified the gap between where they are and where they want to go. If that's not something that's been established, you are going to continue to see people who constantly consume but never take action. And so how I want you to think about, your content is to think about your marketing is actually where you should start. So the content is just the delivery of the marketing's job. First, you want to ask yourself, what is your marketing strategy around a week's worth of posting? Then you want to look at, okay, great. What is the way in which we want to deliver that via content? Now, in the best case scenario, we will have great marketing, which means we're going to create a good gap for the person who's consuming it. But on the contrast, if we also do this in a really creative, entertaining, educational way through social media, you may have great engagement and you can have great sales. Now, I actually want to share a quick story actually for this exact example of a client because she actually, funny enough, is a marketing agency. And when we went into integrating my marketing strategy and kind of what I recommend for her into her socials and into her platforms, she originally was like, "Kate, all of our engagement is not what it used to be." Now, remember, the reason she came to me is because she wanted to make more sales. She wanted to scale. And so I said to her, "You have to understand that not always is the engagement and the, vanity metrics going to match the sales. You kind of have to pick what is the objective that you're mainly focusing on. What's your primary dominant goal and what's your secondary? And between those, is it social media engagement or is it sales that you want to generate?" And her engagement went down. Her sales skyrocketed. And so even for her, it broke her brain as someone who's in marketing because she was like, "Oh my gosh, like I think I was just so nervous about seeing them in the negative in the sense of engagement." But obviously it's generating the outcome that we want. So then what we started to do is we started to realize in her entire marketing ecosystem, everywhere that she was posting, what we did is we started to realize we can have different intentions for different posts. You don't have to have every single thing that you produce be the thing that generates a sale. You also don't have to have every single thing that you produce be the thing that makes you go viral and has tons of engagement. So, what I would recommend to you is really asking yourself those critical questions around the marketing clarity. Do you have that clarity or do you feel like that's a little bit foggy? And also sorting the way in which you're assessing what you're posting. Is that thing you posted designed with marketing in mind and sales in mind? Or was it really designed to be something trendy, something easily consumable, something that's really made for the masses, something that's just entertainment? If so, need to always keep in mind what was the objective and did it meet that objective, not the 18 that we would love for a single post to do. Okay. And that's the last thing I'll leave you with. Remember that you don't need one post to do everything. You have multiple chances at bat, which means that the more that you post, the more that you create, the more opportunities you have to test different things, to have different goals, different objectives, and honestly, not have so much pressure on one single post or one single thing you produce, crushing all the goals that you have at one time. Next question is, I feel like I've outgrown my messaging, but I'm scared to reposition and confuse people. How do you evolve without losing momentum? So this is actually something that a lot of business owners that I talk to experience because they will have an ideal client that they want to be working with, maybe at the beginning when they started their business. And then over time, as things progress, they progress maybe in their skill set or they progress in their business and who they want to work with. You desire to speak to maybe a different problem entirely. So, like, maybe let's just say, I was a fitness coach and now I'm a business coach, totally different category, right? So, we're switching in the sense of avatar, but you also can stay in the same genre or the same niche of business and you can also switch your avatar. So, like for myself, I mainly talk about all of the things that scaling entrepreneurs are navigating. Whereas, I used to speak to both beginners as well as scaling entrepreneurs. And so I basically decided this exact thing to put all of my messaging into one specific person, one problem, and specifically the stage of the problem that they were experiencing. So, to your question, I'm scared to reposition myself because I don't want to confuse people, but I feel like I've kind of outgrown my existing market. One of the things I was literally saying to a client today, because she's going through this too, and she's, I would say, outgrown her market. Her skill sets have developed, her knowledge is extensive. And she was like, I feel like I'm capping myself by staying, supporting this specific niche of person. And so what I said to her is, listen, if you want to rip the band-aid, meaning if you want to just overnight, create a new profile or even on your existing profile, just create all new messaging and go hard at it, you absolutely can. I'm going to forewarn you though, that just because you've made this quick switch does not mean that your audience has made this quick switch. So what I would ask is, if you are somebody who wants to make this shift, ask yourself why you're doing this. Is this because you feel like if I make this shift to a different person, those people have money, so they're going to pay me? Is this like, maybe your kind of intention to help you with something sales wise that you're experiencing? Is this actually because you're like, long term, I really want to work with that ideal client? whatever the answer may be is going to help me to understand if this is something really urgent short term or long term. Ideally, I'd love your answer to be long term, meaning in the next 6 to 12 months, if I could get you business, service, and sales from that ideal client that you want to be working with, would that be okay with you? Would you define that as success? And if that's something that you feel comfortable with, then what I typically look to note is, okay, great. Then we don't need to rush this. Because if you jump from one messaging to a whole other type of person messaging wise, your audience is not going to catch up instantly, which means you may see this dip in the sense of applications, DMs, sales, intake forms, whatever your process is. And so, unless you're somebody that for whatever reason needs this to happen overnight, I am more of the thought process that we want to try to trickle in the messaging. So for myself, I'll use myself as a case study. I used to, as I said, speak to beginners as well as scaling entrepreneurs. I really wanted to work with scaling entrepreneurs. I had years in my business. I had scaled at that point to 7 figures. I knew that that's the person I really wanted to work with. But I also felt like I didn't want to leave, beginners behind. And so I thought, how do I speak to this person while speaking to this person? So what I did is I actually had initially this time where I spoke to both. And let's just say if we think about, a marketing schedule of like five pieces of marketing a week, okay? So Monday to Friday. I would take originally half of those for beginners and half of those for scaling. Then it became 60% of those were for scaling. Then it became 70%. Then it became 80%. And then it became 100%. And basically, what I was looking to do when I was making this slow transition into messaging is I also was looking to validate my shift. I was looking to validate the market. And what I mean by that is, I said this to a client today. She was saying, this is the person I really want to work with. And I said, listen, I get that, but do you have that market? Because if you don't have that market, meaning if I go into the people who are part of your brand today, your followers, your audience on any given platform, what percentage of the people that you're working with are the type of person that you actually want to be working with versus the person that you're working with right now? And that's a critical question, because if you tell me it's 2% are the actual kind of people you want to be working with, then that tells me we need to be very intentional about how we make this shift. Now, in the contrast for myself, I already knew that I had at least 50% of my audience that already were scaling entrepreneurs because they had watched me scale my business. So I knew that I basically already had a 50-50 and I still did it incrementally. But if you're somebody who already knows that you have, say, 50%-ish or more of your audience is that ideal client, you just kind of haven't taken the leap yet, that's very different than feeling like you're going in to speak to a new person. Oh yeah, by the way, a new person that I don't have any access to and that doesn't know I exist. So my recommendation to you of how you do that shift is step 1, get a really detailed crystal clarity of like person A, person B, and what is the true difference and contrast between what they're experiencing in the day-to-day symptoms, the source of their problems, the things they need support with, the outcomes that they desire. Really get specific contrast, almost like on a spreadsheet, like person A, person B. And you need to make sure that in that your messaging is different enough. Because the other thing that I see as well is some people don't have enough contrast in the messaging between person A and person B. And because of that, you kind of feel like you're switching to talking to a different person, but it sounds almost the same. And as a result, you keep attracting the people you don't want to work with. So my recommendation is pick the timeline of your shift. 2, get clarity of exactly what the difference is between the messaging. And then again, validate the market. The thing you want to remember is you're looking to make this shift, but your marketing and your brand needs to catch up. And so we need to first gauge by putting out this marketing of the person you want to work with and that new stage potentially, or that new problem. You want to be able to see how many people do I have in this? And if you have more, you can do this faster. If you have less, you typically are going to want to do it slower. And that's because truthfully, if you're talking to an audience that you don't have, it really is almost the equivalent of starting your business from scratch. Because if I decide tomorrow that I'm speaking to kids who want to learn trampolining, I probably have some moms in my audience. I probably have some of them who have kids who might love a trampoline experience. But the reality is that's not a good majority of my audience. So it's basically like me starting from scratch if it's that big of a contrast. So again, there's a lot to dive into here, but that gives you something to chew on before you start taking action of ripping the Band-Aid and this is my new market and that's it. Okay, how do you attract premium buyers instead of price sensitive leads? Okay, here's what I'm going to say. There is no such thing as a premium buyer. I would rephrase it as there is such a thing as a premium problem. Okay? Buyers are buyers. There's not like a person who goes in to the same store and one person is willing to buy and one person is not willing to buy. I would argue that there are premium problems that people need solved, and there are non-premium problems that people need solved. And so as a result, when you solve a very big premium problem, you're going to call in somebody who actively understands and values and invests in that problem. Okay. On the contrast, in the same market, you can also have people that want to solve a problem, but they are not necessarily looking to invest at a premium level. Okay. So the level of problem you solve is directly correlated to the level of buyer that you will attract. I'm going to give you an example. Right now, I am working with a dog trainer. Okay. And when I work with a dog trainer, she basically comes to my house. She comes, she takes the dogs, she goes and trains them. Some of it's with me, but a lot of it is kind of run and she takes it and does it on her own. Okay. So that's premium problem. And that's because I'm going to be honest, I'm really, really strapped for time because I've got a lot going on right now. And with that, I really need the dogs trained. So because of that, I basically have a level of problem and support that I need, which means I'm willing to invest at a higher level than if someone said, hey, I need you to train your dogs every day and do XYZ, right? So that's what's considered the less premium problem, which is if someone says, hey, do you want to learn how to train your dog? Do you want to come to a group class and learn how to train your dog? That's a different level of problem than the person who says, hey, I can get your dog trained for you within, 12 weeks of meeting your animal. Okay. And I don't have to be involved. Premium problem, premium service. Lower level problem, lower level buyer. And that's because the lower level isn't like there's like high people and low people. I hate when people say premium buyers because it associates that there's like high level people and low level people. The reality is there's just big problems and small problems. One of the things that I can't remember exactly who said this, but they said if you always want to have a successful business, make sure that you solve a problem that people who value that, who have the ability and the resources to invest into it, want to solve. So the thing you want to keep in mind is there's not premium buyers, first of all. There's just a different level of problems. So, how do we attract those people? Number one, get clear on the actual problem that you're right now solving. If your problem that you're solving is considered a low level problem, you will always attract low level buyers. And that's because the problem's low. So they're coming in wanting to invest low because the thing that it's doing for them is not solving a big enough problem. Whereas on the contrast, if we can switch your messaging around your offer, and this is the key, I don't need you to change your offer. I don't need you to change a lot about what it is that you're actually doing. I need you to change your positioning. Okay. So this is where people get really, I would say, astray. And that's because they believe, okay, like what's the new offer I need to create? What should I, develop about the offer? Truthfully, a lot of the time when we help people with this, we're not changing the offer. We're changing the positioning of the offer, which means when someone views this or when they experience this, where do they see it on the spectrum of premium or low? And so, what I would recommend is getting very clear on the promise and the problem that you're noted to solve. And also, once you do that, you then need to go back to what are the specific ways that somebody experiences that problem or that someone wants to experience that end transformation. Because if you are not crystal clear on those, the way you speak in marketing, the things that you talk about, the things that you integrate, the experiences that you note that they're going through, basically, if I could put it candidly, how seen someone feels in your marketing and like, oh my gosh, that person gets us. If someone who's a premium buyer feels acknowledged, and like, for example, for myself with the dog training, I felt acknowledged of like, I don't have time to spend, 2, 3 hours a day training my 2 dogs. Like it's not something that I have in this season of my life. So this individual acknowledged that and was like, "Hey, yeah, no problem. This is exactly why we can help you with A, B, C." So what we want to look at is first, again, problem and promise. Two, clarity of exactly how does that show up in that person's life that you want to be attracting. And here's the most important part. Your marketing's job is to bring them in, but the way that you sell somebody, and most importantly, the actual delivery you provide is just as important as the forward-facing marketing. And that is because if we go in to any business, it doesn't matter what it is, and we are expecting a premium service, a premium, sale of investing into something, a premium experience of the delivery, and we don't get that, we are going to tell everyone that we know that it looks one way, but it is not that way inside. And so something that I see with a lot of people who desire to market to people or sell to people who are premium is that they think that the marketing and just what they put out on social and looking luxury is enough. No, the thing that is actually the most influential of whether you'll actually be seen as a premium service, as a premium offer, is going to come down to what is the congruency and consistency from the moment someone finds you to the moment that they're done your service. And if that is not consistent and congruent, you will have everybody telling anyone else they know that what you're offering is not actually premium. It's just basically fancy wrapping paper on a really crappy product. So that's also something to keep in mind if you're wanting to tap into those premium buyers. Okay. If sales are inconsistent month to month, where do you look first? Well, first place I'm going to honestly look is the marketing, which is to say, how consistent is the marketing? You would be shocked how many people that I talk to that I will say, okay, great. Yeah, you want to have more consistent sales. Tell me about how consistent you are in your marketing. And they'll be like, well, that is, I'm really, I know I need to be better. And I'm like, okay, so that's where we have to start. We should not, and this I'm just going to put it as a PSA. You should not be expecting consistent sales if you are not consistently marketing your business. Point blank, period, end of conversation. If you are not marketing, do not expect consistent sales. Now, I want to be very clear. There are businesses that have referral-based business, which means that they can get consistent referrals. But even those, while they're great, are not necessarily predictable and they're not controllable. They still at any moment could stop or could stall. So you want to ask yourself, am I consistently marketing? That's one thing that I look at. The second thing is, if you are consistently marketing, how often would you say that you're actually inviting your audience to work with you? Meaning, how often are you actually asking for the sale? And I ask this because I see a lot of people who will add value. They will show up. They'll, teach, they'll kind of inspire, they'll post some personal content. They're posting things and I can see that you're active, but I don't know anything here about your offer. I'm not seeing you market the transformation. I'm not seeing you invite me to work with you. I don't even know the name of your offer. So if I can't find that information, or if I feel like I'm not seeing that, it means that you're probably being consistent, but you're not actually inviting people to work with you, which is crucial if you are somebody that wants consistent sales. Now, the other thing that I would also note is consistent sales typically insinuates conversion. So the other thing that I would also look at is how many opportunities for a sale are you getting versus how many sales, meaning conversions, are you getting? Because this is also something where people get really bottlenecked. So I have two different situations of recent clients. When they came to me, one person had lots of applications, but the people on the application wouldn't book a call, or they'd book a call, they wouldn't show, or if they did show, they didn't close. So the application process itself was feeling for her a little bit clunky. Things weren't flowing easily. On the contrast, I had another client, totally different business, who had DMs as their main way of selling. And what we found was that this person was getting lots of interest. A lot of people messaging her, this keyword or that keyword, which is great. That's what we want. But when they would message her, they'd get stalled. They'd get stalled in the DMs. They would just get stuck there and they wouldn't end up buying. And so it wasn't a matter of her needing more leads. It wasn't matter for the other person of needing more leads. There was a disconnect for both of them, but in different ways within their sales process. And so what we actually need to fix to generate more sales was not necessarily more marketing. It wasn't to generate more leads. It was to make sure that the people who were inquiring, the people who were reaching out, actually were buying, to actually get them over the finish line to get their investment in, to get the contract signed, to get the payment secured. We actually need to make sure these people are getting over the finish line. And so when we think about, adjusting our sales, we want to really make sure that we're auditing where specifically in the people finding us to booking or inquiring to actually, investing, where in that are people getting stuck, or where is your biggest bottleneck? Because most of us just see we're lacking money in our bank account. I need to fix that. But not enough people sit and actually break down what that pipeline is made of. So I want you to almost think about it like a chain, okay? Like literally in your mind, picture a chain right now. And each, a chain is a series of little links connected. Your marketing and sales ecosystem is just like that. There's a bunch of different little links. So there's like, okay, great. Social, there's the people that follow, that engage. There's the people that, go to the application versus message us in the DMs. There's all these different moving pieces. So we have to be able to isolate the issue, because something that I always tell people, and I tell clients, I tell people who are wanting to work with me, I say the main thing that I'm seeing is that you are actually solving for the symptom, not the source. So the example I'd give to you is, if your symptom you're feeling is like, I need more sales, I need more sales. And listen, all of us have been there. We all want more sales. I feel like there's not a single business really right now that doesn't want more sales. If the symptom is like, I need more sales, if you look at the wrong thing, you're going to solve for the wrong source, right? So your belief might be like, oh my gosh, we need more leads. We need more leads. But then I come in and I'm like, well, wait a second. You had 100 people that wanted to work with you. And out of 100, 10 signed. You don't need more leads, because if I do that, guess what? You'll have 200 people inquire and only 20 people sign. What we need to fix is the sales process. So the thing you want to be really, really clear on in your business at any given moment when you're looking to solve a problem is, do I really feel like, what level of confidence, 1 to 10, how confident are you that you actually know the true source of why X problem is happening? Okay. So if you're feeling some resistance, like people are having objections, or people aren't buying, or I feel like people aren't renewing, you really want to ask yourself before you take any action, do I confidently know the source of why this is happening? What level of confidence do you have in that? If you're not quite confident, let's just say you're not a 10, then that tells me we don't want to integrate any new strategy, because you, without actually knowing what the source is, could make it worse, not better. So that's basically what I would say to the aspect of, if sales are not consistent, what should I do? Now, this is kind of an interesting follow-up question to that, which is a great segue. How do I know if it's a lead quality issue that I have or a sales issue? Because leads are not great. Okay, how do I know if it's a lead quality issue or a sales skill issue? Because yes, leads aren't great. Oh, okay, and some's not closing. Okay, so if you're getting on the phone or you're in the DMs with someone and they're not buying, and you're asking yourself, okay, is that the lead or is it me? Simple question to really isolate this. This is a very quick one. The person that you're talking to, do they have the specific problem that you solve? Okay. If you're like, yes, they do. Okay, great. 2, does this person want the promise or the transformation that it is that you provide? If you say yes, okay, great. Is this person the avatar of somebody that you want to work with? Are they the specific individual ideal client that you're looking to support? Yes. Okay, great. Well, then that tells me they are qualified. That means that I'm going to give you an example of this. So obviously I help businesses. So their problem, they're struggling to scale their business. They don't have leads. They're struggling to close consistently, and they don't know how to deliver to lots of people without burning out. Okay, great. Yes, I do that. 2, the promise. They really want to go from 6 figures to 7 figures. Well, yes, I do that. So technically, by all intents and purposes, this person is somebody that I can help. Avatar. They are an e-commerce business that sells candles. Not a good fit. So what it means is I ask myself those 3 basically filtering questions. And the only other thing, which is not a very tactical thing when it comes to sales, but it is something that I will say after time in business, I've really grown to appreciate, is how I might say like personalities/values, which basically means that, someone can hit all the boxes of what you technically do, but they may have an aura, a vibe, an essence about them that you're like, I don't know if this is my person, right? So I think about this like dating. You can be like, okay, what's your type? I want to, this is very stereotypical, but like a 6'5" or 6', 6'5" is very large. So like very tall, 6 feet guy who is brown hair and blue eyes. Okay, great. This is your guy. He's got all those qualities. Great, you've won the jackpot. However, he has a weird quirk that you are like, oh, I don't know if I'm into that. Or he has a weird interest, or he has, something that he's like really aggressively into politically that you don't align with, right? There are definitely things with leads that are going to hit certain boxes. The rest, I would say, is values and personality, which you're typically going to get a vibe of in the sales process of if you're a good fit. Now, there's the logistical qualifiers, are those 3 questions. The vibe part, what I would say is the way to overcome that, if you are getting people that are technically looking to do what you do, but they're not quite the kind of people you want to be working with, meaning their vibe's off. If I'm going to be honest and just super direct with you, that's actually a result of you and the way that you're showing up as a brand. So, to be honest, I had an era of my business where I was kind of like, I hate this terminology, so don't use this against me, but I was in my boss babe era a little bit, okay? I don't love that term, but I was in this, season of just like really like hustle and grind and just like more and like so many blazers. Oh my God, so many blazers. Like just really intense. And you know what's shocking, but also not shocking? At that time, I really brought in a ton of people who were very intense, like in the sense of like their energy and the persona, the values were also very intense. So the thing that I recognize is like they again had the problem. They were looking to solve the thing that I could solve, and they were somebody that technically was the ideal client I served. But the last piece was, do they have the values and the personality or, the vibe of the kind of person I want to work with? And for a while, I didn't filter that. But I will tell you, it is something that since, the last couple years, I have really spent more intention being like, is this person like a good human? Is this someone I feel like I could have dinner with? Because otherwise, I don't really know that I want to do business with you. And so that's also something that I've been really considering in filtering. So to that, I would say lead quality issue, that's what I would audit. To the piece of sales skill, if all those things are happening and you're not closing, it is 100% a sales skill issue. Okay. So if all those things are a yes, and you're like, yep, that's what I do, they're my people, then if they're not buying, it is 100% a sales skill issue. Okay, I am feeling captain scaling and I'm wondering if I should delegate sales. At what point should a founder stop doing their own sales? I would honestly say it kind of depends on your business because it depends on the volume of sales that you're having. So if you're getting on, for example, like tons and tons and tons of calls and you're feeling like I literally don't have time on my calendar to do all these calls, then yeah, you probably would need to do one of 2 things. Build a system. So, stop doing your own sales doesn't also necessarily mean that you have to delegate it to someone. So like if you're doing calls, it doesn't mean you have to do the next step of hiring a high ticket phone closer. You also could shift to DM selling and drastically reduce the amount of time or the amount of hours in selling. So to the question, which is like, when should you stop doing sales? I think truthfully, when it really is like the last piece in the business that you haven't delegated. Because I believe that, delivery is one of the first things that every business should delegate. Or technically I would say admin is one of the first things that every business should delegate. Admin and ops, like I'm going to tell you right now, unless your brain is like this beautiful mind of like systems and structure and organization, unless that's like really your skill set, I really highly recommend admin and ops because the things that the incredible Kelsey Dearborn have built inside my business, if she had left me until now to figure those out, I couldn't have. And that's because that's her genius. It's not mine. So I really think bringing in the right people for admin and ops is a game changer. 2, I would say the second piece that I would outsource would be delivery or marketing, whatever's more constraining to you. I probably would recommend it be delivery because I do think that marketing still is something that a lot of founders know best themselves. So then I would do marketing and then I would do sales because again, I'd be more in line with you systematizing sales, automating some parts of sales, streamlining the process, simplifying it before giving it to a person. And that's because truthfully, for most people, no one is going to sell your product or your service better than you are. Okay. Next question, is it smarter to scale one offer or to build multiple? If I'm going to give you my short answer, one offer, because I think you like, again, classic quote that you guys have heard me share, which I actually got from my coaches, is that you have to earn the right to complicate your business. And I really resonate with that because I think even myself, I've been guilty of this where I kind of just like want to do all the things. And oftentimes when you go back to the evidence, when you go back to the data, you very quickly realize that even though you added all that stuff, it's not actually something that moved the needle in the business. It's not actually something that was the catalyst for your growth. And even for myself, when I was reviewing my own business, I've done a lot of stuff. I've done, dinners, I've done retreats. We obviously have our mastermind. I do private coaching. I've done VIP days. I've done intensives. I've done master classes. I've done all of the stuff. And the thing that I would say has always moved the needle are literally 2 offers. Like, and the shocking part is that the same 2 offers I started with in year 1. And so I would say, like, the retreats for us were not this massive needle mover when I look back at the data now. The dinners, I love them. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love them. I found them to be such a good time, but they're not something that I would say is like a groundbreaking needle mover for the business. I just really like doing them, but our mastermind accelerator has been around forever and is something that I really will say is, a product, a program, a service that I love and that our clients love. And in addition to that is private coaching. I basically never promote my private because it's always booked. And that's because these are 2 services, 2 ways of coaching with us that are always in demand. And so I think a lot of people overestimate what is needed. And even take this out of, my coaching business. Okay, an example of a product would be Scrub Daddy, right? Scrub Daddy had this little smiley face scrubby thing, and that's a signature, what they consider to be a hero product. It's something that is literally their singular product that they're known for. And at that point, once that was super successful, then they went wider. And that's also what I did. I used to only have private and accelerator, and then I went wider. And now that after I've gone wider, I'm going back because I just recognize that's where all of our momentum has come from. Another example would be Coca-Cola. Perfect example. Like traditional can of red Coca-Cola. Like that is a product that was the signature product for a very, very long time. They waited a while before bringing out, Diet Coke and caffeine-free Coke and then Coke Zero and then Cherry Coke and, vanilla Coke and all this stuff. That was when they expanded their product line, but they first really spent a good amount of time in verifying their product and most importantly, verifying their brand. One of the things that I think is kind of it's unfortunate is that brands try to go so wide so fast that you don't necessarily know what you're known for. Like I don't really know which offer is like your signature offer because you just have so freaking many. So I would also say to the question of, to scale, is it about one core offer or building multiple offers? I would definitely say one. And I want to share something that was shared with me recently, which I'm actually going to be sharing on another episode with you in depth. It's called the 5 ones. This is something that was shared with me from, I give credit always where it is due, Talking More, as well as he referenced it. I believe his name was Clay Collins, who came up with this originally. And so Talking More shared it with me, originally created by Clay Collins. And it was basically the structure of the 5 ones. And the 5 ones basically meaning, one target audience, one offer, one marketing channel, one sales process for 1 year. And this really fits into that model. They believe that you do that all the way to a year to get to $1 million, that you don't need to have so much complexity. And, when we were chatting about this, it made me realize and made me reflect on my own business of really where those ones have been actually the most influential part of our business. And so for you, when we think about, doing more, ask yourself, why do you need multiple offers? Why do you need more stuff? And if you're doing it for fun, go ahead. Like I did for the dinners. Like I knew the dinners were not a moneymaker. I knew that my retreats were not, in the way that I wanted to run them, going to be this like massive, multiple 6-figure revenue stream. That wasn't really the point of doing it. But when I thought about, okay, going into the business this year from a financial goal perspective, how do we want to achieve that? I recognize it's actually quite simple. It's literally one offer, like max 2 offers. And so I really believe simplicity scales. I think if you can keep it simple in the sense of financial, it's really not going to take much more than one offer. So in my opinion, I'd say stick to one. All right, I'm booked out, but delivery feels really heavy and dependent on me. What does that signal? Okay, well, if you're booked out, that's great. As long as, again, these are ideal clients you want to work with. They're paying the rates that you want to charge. They're not like people who are on rates from like 5 years ago that you're keeping. Then that's good. Here's the thing. Delivery feels heavy and dependent on me. What does that signal? What does that mean to you? Okay. If you're booked out, but you're drowning, it likely means that you have put yourself as like the nucleus of your business, which means that it literally can't run, operate, or function without you. So the thing that I see is sometimes when people are scaling, you may be putting yourself as the doer, which means anything and everything problem wise in the business has to be solved by you, which means as you scale your clients, you scale your pressure. As you scale your clients, you scale your workload. As you scale your clients, you scale your hours. If growth of the business, meaning if becoming more booked out means you becoming more burnt out, then you don't necessarily want to go full throttle on the gas of scaling the business. So, what I take from that is it probably means in some capacity, whether I don't want to say this was intentional because this happens a lot of the time unintentionally, but if you are somebody that feels like if I take on more business, I'm going to go under, like I'm going to drown, I can't, do more kickoffs, I can't do more delivery, I can't do more sales calls, whatever it might be, in the idea of taking on more clients, does that make you feel stressed because you feel like you would be burdening a lot of it? Then it typically means that you're too much into the process. So one of the things that I would recommend is if you're booked out but delivery is heavy, first thing I would do is start documenting, especially if you're somebody who is in an agency model, even more so. I would really start to think about, do I have effective documentation of the stuff that I'm doing right now? This is not a matter of making fancy trainings. It can literally even just be showcasing videos or recording videos of what your current processes are and allowing that to just be saved in a bank that when you bring on somebody to assist you, you've got documentation of how you're doing things and the way that you're doing them. So I would personally say to look at that because if delivery feels heavy, the thing that you want to be really conscious of, and I've seen this with businesses, which is why I mention it, if your delivery is very connected to you, indirectly, like not consciously, like subconsciously, you're going to resist marketing yourself. You're going to resist sales. And that's because you know down the line that both marketing and sales lead to more work on your plate, which isn't something that you're looking to invite. It isn't something that you're excited by. So because of that, I would really, really recommend thinking about how can you document to then first look at what you can do to become more efficient or systematize. Even with AI, there's a lot of things that you can dial in these days. And then if that is not something that you feel like you can do with AI, looking at a person. But before you ever think about getting personal support, you always want to make sure that you have something documented for that person to use as their guideline. Okay. What's the first system you install when you scale? What is the first system you install when you want to scale out of founder dependency? Well, we technically covered just that. So I would say cue the answer before that one. Okay. How do you know if your back-end operations are capping your revenue? Ooh, great question. There's two sides to this. Operations can cap your business because it's too basic, meaning that you literally don't have the infrastructure you need to take on more clients without things going astray. On the contrast, I will say I have also seen in businesses people who make these just exorbitant, overly complicated, overly difficult, way too complex systems and processes and automations and tracking and data. And they have like all these like crazy like dashboards or spreadsheets or whatever it is. And I'm like, dude, we just need these four numbers to be visible. Can we get those four numbers, please? Like, that's what we need to make a decision. So I would say both. If you are somebody that's scaling, there's a lot of people who, when you're growing initially, you can be really scrappy because it's just you, right? Like it's maybe you and one other person, maybe two people. You don't really need a lot necessarily with a small, tight knit, team like that to be able to grow. Now, on the contrast, though, it is something that once you get to a threshold of a certain amount of clients, you're going to outgrow it. So like even if you have no data right now and you have no tracking and you have no processes and you have no documentation, you're going to reach a threshold at some point. For every business, that threshold is different. but you're going to reach a threshold where you go, oh my God, things are really chaotic. And that's often a byproduct of the fact that you don't have internal processes set up. So I would say how it could be capping your ability for revenue is that you're doing things potentially repeated that don't need to be repeated. You're doing things that take lots of revisions that you could reduce the revisions if you had better documentation or better systems or processes. You may be, feeling like you're adding 7 steps to things that you're like, oh wow, there was an automation that could just, handle all of that. So that's kind of option one. The other option to look at or think about for yourself is it possible that the level of complexity that you've added to your processes is actually the thing that's keeping you from doing what you need to do? And it's something that even myself, I've been really appreciating a lot. And you guys always hear me talk about her, but I'm just such a big fan. Kelsey Dearborn has been with our business for what feels like forever now, for ages. She's the OG. She's the first hire ever. And the things that she's integrated, one of the things I really appreciate about her approach is that when she integrates something, she doesn't look to make it overly complicated. She doesn't look to make it complex. She's not looking to make it, when she hands it to me, like this is the fanciest thing I could make. She's like, hey, like these are the functions of what you needed it to do. It does that. Like you can see this, you can see that. You click here, it will do this. Like it hits the functions. So one of the things I really appreciate about her approach is that she was able to take times where our business was like, just like, whoa, like was lots going on. And she took systems and made them really simple. She took processes and didn't mean that they needed a ton of management and a lot of constant monitoring. She always kept it simple. And I think that there's this tendency when people try to scale that they feel complication or fanciness is what makes them official. It is what makes them legit. And I would actually argue the opposite. I've seen businesses that are doing, 7 million a year who are literally using spreadsheets. So I by no means believe or buy in to this perspective that the level of complication is directly correlated to the effectiveness, because they're not. So I would say, how can ops or the back end keep your revenue capped? You're either overcomplicating it and that's bloating the business, or you have nothing established and that's bloating the business. Both bloat the business from making more money. They just do it in different ways. Great question, by the way. Really, really good question. Okay. I've hired before and it didn't go well. How do you rebuild trust in team? It's a really common question. I actually had this literally from somebody today. They said I'm scared to hire because I hired before and it was a disaster. The classic quote is, hiring is guessing, firing is knowing. And the thing that I take from that is that I don't really think as a business owner that you can ever get out of business unscathed by a difficult hiring story. All of us have stories about, that person was not a good hire for the following reasons, or this didn't work out and I'm worried it would happen again. But if I'm going to give you an analogy, the way that I would think about this is you have to look at this almost like relationships in your life, like a partnership or a friendship that goes sour. If you had a previous team member, whether it is part-time, contractor, full-time, whatever it might be, and again, all of us have them. I have not talked to a single person who has team that doesn't have some kind of team story. And the thing that I would say with that is it's just learning. So think about it like a romantic partner, like a partner that you have, as a business partner or a friend. You want to keep in mind that you don't want that one circumstance, that one situation to be the thing that completely blocks you from all potential blessings that could come into your life when it comes to team. And even for myself, one of our last hires, previous to that, we had 3 people that didn't work out in totally different departments. We had 3 people that didn't work out, basically all seemingly back to back. And I'm going to be honest, at that point, I questioned myself and I said, okay, like, is it me? Like, am I really, not fun to work with? Like, am I like, I started to have all the things that you're asking. I think it's a fair question to say, like, I'm scared to hire again. Like, what if that happens again? And so if you think, what if that happens again? What you really have to isolate is, why did it happen in the first place? And that helped me because I recognized, one of the situations was that I'm a big data person, and the person that I let go was not someone who cared about data. So I was like, that was a misalignment in the sense of expectations with the role. Got it. 2 was somebody that I hired that I really had hopes that they were going to work out, but the product that they produced was not the level of the caliber that we needed for the business. And so I didn't know what caliber they could produce without truthfully hiring them. I had to kind of get them in there. And once I got in there, I tried, I workshopped it, I feedbacked it, but it just wasn't working out. So I had to let them go. And the third person, I actually really enjoyed working with and was, in my mind, a great energy to have within our team. But there became a circumstance where there was just a big difference in values and the representation of those values in how we show up every day. And so with that, we don't work together any longer. So it like all just situations that you had to go through to learn these lessons, and all good people, all people that I would say only positive things about. Like, it was just disconnects on things that maybe I wasn't clear about, was kind of what I looked at. I'm like, did I have ownership in this? Was I unclear? Was there lack of training? Was there potentially, maybe I shouldn't have hired this person in the first place? Did I do my due diligence in hiring them? Really actually reflect on what your lessons were from that. And here's the thing, the most important thing is that you take those lessons and awareness and you bring that into your next hire. It would be very different if you go in being like, well, I don't know what happened over there, but I'm just going to hire again. That's when you repeat the same situation over and over. The people that really critically sit down and think about and reflect on what has happened, why did that happen? What role did I have? What role did they have? Could there be anything I integrate to prevent that in the future? When you ask those questions, you're not often going to end up with the same situation repeating itself over and over because you break the pattern. So I would say, just like a relationship, don't allow one situation to rewrite and assume that this is a blanket scenario, that meaning anything else in the future is going to be the exact same, because I can guarantee you, as long as you change the pattern, it won't be. Okay. So, what does building a real leadership layer in your business look like? I'm somebody who feels like I don't know what it means to lead. Great question. I didn't either. When I started hiring people, I hired a leadership coach, and what we worked on together was understanding that there's a big difference between leadership and management. And this is something that I think is a really crucial piece. If you are someone that has a team, you have to understand that management is basically auditing tasks and completion and projects and achievements and all of those. And we need that in a business. You need both. You need leadership and you need management. But a lot of people don't understand what leadership means, which basically is, as I see it, if I was going to define it myself, not this is the definition in the dictionary, it's basically how you understand the internal cues, triggers, motivators, desires, and needs of your team members, to know person to person what those are and how you can support someone with those to excel in what it is that they do, to not only help them, but obviously indirectly to help the business as well. And so, what I would say to the aspect of leadership, like building a leadership layer into the business, truthfully, you're going to have to start with yourself. Like, this is really not going to come down to your team. It's about, you need to learn how to lead. You need to learn, what is your style of leadership? Where are you lacking as a leader? I had to have some really clear conversations with myself where I realized, okay, wow, like previously my leadership was like task, 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 task. And then I realized, I was like, I want people to take ownership. I want them to feel agency. And then basically I had, someone say to me, they're like, yeah, but you don't even let them take agency. Like, you literally don't release enough control for someone else to take agency over their department. They could. They're the kind of people who could, no question, but you won't let go. And it was really having those conversations that made me realize, okay, wow, this is not oh, we need a system, or we need this, or we need that. There's a lot to be said about documentation, but it's also a matter of, where are you in the way that you show up for your people, or the way that you lack showing up for your people? Where are you capping your business? And I think that that is something that was a really important conversation, and still is a conversation that I'm always working on. So I would say, if I could recommend anything to you, start reading leadership books, start, listening to podcasts on leadership, start asking yourself, what does it mean to lead? And recognize, most importantly, that people think leadership is about critiquing people, and it's about, leadership is all about, enforcing the rules and all of this stuff. But I would actually say, in today's current market or today's current business structure, leadership is actually a lot about how you can lead from the front and lead by example. And so if you're somebody that cares about the level of detail of your work, if you're somebody who cares about, how people feel, if you're somebody who cares about what people are going through in their life while they're navigating their work, like, that's something that's going to bleed into your team. And so I realized at a certain point in my business, I really knew what my team did, but I didn't know how my team was doing. Okay. So I got to this place in my business where I'm like, I know what they're doing and what they're up to, but I don't know how they're doing. And I was like, that sucked to realize, to be honest, because I realized I was like, whoa, like they're working with me, but like you don't work for me. Like you work with me, you don't work for me. And I realized that shift, because I had all this like corporate mumbo jumbo in my head of like, okay, like this is what you need are the people who work for you and so on and so forth. I was like, but I don't want people who work for me. I want people who work with me. And what I realized was as a leader, I I knew what they were doing, but I didn't know how they were doing. And that's a question that I would ask you. Do you know the people that you're working with, how they're doing? And so, like, I know that one person that I'm working with is navigating, like, hey, I think I have ADHD. I don't know what the heck's going on. And then the other person's like, hey, I really want to learn more about this regulation and kind of inner work. And someone else is talking about the fact that they're really learning a lot about things that are happening of being a homeowner and, the phase that they're going through right now and they're experiencing, new opportunities with that. And then I'm talking to somebody else who, they were sharing with me is learning a lot about releasing of other people's things and how they're holding for people, right? Like nothing to do with their tasks, nothing to do with outcomes, nothing to do with the goals of the business, but it tells me like how are they doing? And that allows me to know when I'm giving them tasks, when I'm giving them things to work on, when I'm asking for their help with things, it really helps me to understand what frame of reference are they coming in with as to what they're navigating when they approach that task or when they approach that project. So, what is the identity shift required to go from multi 6 to 7 figures in your business? Ooh, getting out of the doing and becoming the person like don't think I'm removing myself, think I'm moving up. So a lot of people when they think about going to 7 figures, they're like, I don't want to remove myself. I love my business. So do I. Like I love my business too. This is not about you in order to go to 7 figures, removing yourself and you go sit if you want to, you can, but like if you don't go sit in a spa and you have nothing to do with the business anymore, it's about changing the role in which you're leverageable. And I think the biggest difference to the question of what is the biggest shift in identity is realizing where are you most valuable, and the identity we have to release is that the places you used to be most valuable might not be the place that you're most valuable anymore. And so I see people, for example, in an agency or if you're a coach, you might be most valuable in like the day-to-day doing of the work with your clients, but the reality is the 7-figure version of you, that's not where you're leverageable. That may not be where you're most effective in helping the business to grow. And the other identity piece I would say that I can't skip over by any means is recognizing that like if you want to operate at a premium level, if you want to really operate as like that top performer in business, start acting like it. Like I take myself to church on this all the time because when I feel like I'm in like this slump, like if I feel like I'm like low motivation or if I feel like I'm not like, fulfilling things the way I could, I'm like, hey, you, like, get into training. Like, you've fallen off your training. You've fallen off the way that you need to show up to be that person. Like, oh, you just want 7 figures handed to you? You want 7 figures on a platter without doing work, without doing the mindset work, without learning regulation, without having the habits, without changing your circle, without doing these things? Like, you have to recognize that 7 figures a year in a business is an incredible achievement. And that takes a specific way of operating as an individual. And so, I even have seen from myself, this is like so weird to say because I feel so self vulnerable, if that's a word. It's not. I recognize even now, like from multiple 6 to 7, from 7 to multiple 7. And if you're at multiple 7 wanting to go to 8, 8 figures a year, you have to evolve if you want your business to evolve. The person you are today, who's making a certain amount of money, whatever that amount is in your business right now, the person that you are today is not the person you're going to be when you get to where you want to go. And I'm not talking personality. I love chocolate now as much as I love chocolate at 6 figures, okay? I love, a good rom-com now the same way I did then. I'm not talking about your personality, okay? I'm talking about the way that you see problems is going to shift. the way that you see stress and how you navigate stress is going to shift. I had a phone call a couple weeks ago and someone was like, "Hey, here's a $40,000 surprise." And I was like, okay. Like, I was like, this is crazy, but also let's just handle it. And past me, like me 7 years ago, I'd be like, what are you talking about? And I would be like freaking out. And I just remember like Kelsey, our team member, is there when I got this call. And I was like, well, like it took me a second, but I was like, okay, that would have taken me a week. It would have been taking me 2 weeks before. And so like nervous system regulation, how you look at problems, your habits, the excuses that you make, how consistent you are, like these are things that compound into helping you to have that 7-figure business. So it's not about changing your personality. It's more about changing of the way in which you show up in your day-to-day within your business and the way you approach things, the perspective you bring, the clarity you bring, the calm you bring, the chaos potentially you bring. Those are things you got to dial in if you really want to have a 7 or a multiple 7-figure business. And honestly, it's a lot of what I coach even my private clients on, because some of them are learning to flex this muscle for the first time. And, they'll say, let's just say this team member did X. And I said, hey, it's not the team member. It's the training. It's us. We get to lead better. We get to manage better. We get to make better documentation. We get to make better processes. Like this starts with I'm fixing it and I'm going to lead. Instead of like we point fingers, we don't point fingers. We own it and we say, okay, what was my involvement in this? What was their involvement? And how can I fix this problem? So it's just the way in which you approach the business, I would say, is the biggest shift. And then on the personal bucket, like I don't believe that you should ditch everything that you used to do and like see ya old friends and see you, you know what I mean? Like I don't think that that's necessary. I think it's more about personality wise, you should stay anchored in who you are. Like I think there's a significance, there's a value in staying humble. I think there's a value in staying kind. I think there's a value in staying wholesome. And yeah, I think that the biggest identity shift is not who you are as a person. It's about who is the person that you bring to the business each day, might be the way that I'd phrase that. I kind of like that. I might steal that for myself. Okie dokie. Let's go with one final one here. We got a lot more, which I feel like we're going to need a part 2 to this. But, if you could help me, this is such a good question. If you could help me only fix one thing to unlock my ability to scale, what would you look at to decide what it is? I get to pick one thing to help you to grow. Okay. I got it. I got it. Okay. So I'm actually not going to tell you. I'm going to ask you questions because I want you to figure out what yours is. Okay. So in your business, when you have had the most flow, the most success, the most ease in your business, what were you doing? So what were the actions you were taking? Was it marketing? Was it sales? Was it a certain offer? Was it a certain thing you were doing with your brand, with your team? So when you saw the most momentum in your business, what were you doing? And the first question I would ask you is, how consistent or close are you to doing those same things today? How many of those have you let go of? How many of those have you been like, oh, I delegated that, or I gave that away, or I systematized that? There's a possibility that if you're like, yeah, I'm still doing those things today, but they look very different, that in doing that delegation, systematizing, etc., you've scaled out what was working about in the first place. So that's one thing that I would ask. Second thing I would ask is, what is the biggest thing that you know could catapult your business that you're not doing? And you know what that is. So what is the biggest thing that you know could catapult your business and help it to scale, but that you're actively not doing? It doesn't really matter why you're not doing it. Some people are like, oh, well, it's time, or it's resources, or it's energy, or it's, I'm just scared, or whatever it might be. What is that thing that you fully know if you doubled down on it, it would really massively help your business? Or if you started doing it, it would massively help your business? What is something that you believe to be true about yourself right now that you know you would need to release or let go of to have $1 million business? And if 7 figures a year in your business could look easy or could be easy, what would that look like? Paint that picture for me in your head right now. Just answer that in your head. If you could have $1 million a year in your business and it would be easy, what would that look like? And now that you've got that picture, level 1 to 10, how consistently and how passionately or intensely, whatever word resonates with you, are you pursuing that daily? Yes, that's what I would say. I would say the one thing, if you wanted my strategy side, the one thing is really reflective of your business. So it entirely depends on what you're experiencing. If you are somebody who feels like you want the strategy answer to unlock the one thing you need for 7 figures, my question to you would be, what is one thing you can delete from your business that is causing you time, energy, resources, and distraction that has not actually moved the needle for you in the last 6 months? Whatever that thing is that you're thinking of. So take that. Someone came to me and they said, "Oh, I have a DM setter. She, books calls for me." I said, "Great. How many calls has she booked in the last 6 months for you?" "Well, we haven't had very good success with it recently." I said, "Great. Nix that. Move her to a different department." And she was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah. Why would we keep paying a DM setter who's not setting things?" Right? Why would we keep paying a gardener who's killing the flowers? Like, let's bring them into a different part. I'm not saying fire them. I'm saying take the energy, resources, and time and put it somewhere else. Put it into something that's actually creating momentum. So the strategy question would be, what is one thing right now in your business that you are doing that has not moved the needle in any capacity? There's no evidence to say it's creating momentum. There's no results to show for it. And with that, the number one thing that I want you to do is I want you to delete it. And that is because there's time, energy, and resources that are being put into something you're doing right now that are not actually helping you. And you probably believe on some level that if I do more, of course I'm going to make more. It's the complete opposite. And I had to learn this very uncomfortable, hard way. This is something where you are going to actually need to do less in order for you to make more. And so it's going to mean getting really critical with the stuff that you're working on if you want to make 7 figures. And with this, 7 figures is different per person. 7 figures is not this easy, formula of like A plus B equals C and boom, you made 7 figures. It's dependent on what your offer is, your team size, your marketing, all of these pieces of what I would tell you to change are definitely reflective of what kind of business structure you have. So with that being said, if you are somebody listening today who has resonated with the questions that we've shared, you are like, hey, I had that question, or I am struggling with that, or I am navigating that. I feel like a lot of what the questions that were submitted were very, very common, very relevant to things I've experienced and clients who come to me are experiencing. And so with all of that, if you are somebody that is in your place of your business right now and you are like knowing that you're not where you want to be, you know you want to achieve more, you know that you're feeling these resistances, you know where to find me. Shoot me a message on Instagram. I would love to chat with you to see how I could support you. If any of this resonated with you, the other thing I can also say is submit a question to have your question on Ambitious. This is something that I love to do, to be able to coach people, to be able to pour in. And so if you are somebody who is looking to get advisement for something you're navigating, submit it through the website. Go through the website. There's a form there. It can be entirely anonymous for you. You can submit a question of what you're experiencing. And when we have our next Unfiltered episode, we will feature your question to give you your personalized answer. So with all that being said, I will see you on next week's episode. And as always, stay ambitious.